At 2:41 in the afternoon on April 7th, 1945, Seaman First Class Thomas Tommy Rourke braced a weapon that didn't exist in any Navy manual against the oil-slicked steel of the USS Franklin's flight deck. Above him, an Aichi D-3A Val dive bomber screamed toward the carrier at 250 knots. Its pilot was committed to a run that would put a 550-pound bomb directly into the ship's tower. The carrier's big 40mm guns roared, their explosive shells flying high. Too high. The smaller 20mm guns turned desperately, but their minimum shooting range created a 900-yard killing corridor where American gunners could only watch enemy pilots complete their attacks with almost total safety. Rohr's rifle, a custom-built Springfield put together from mail-order parts, loaded with illegal match-grade ammunition, mounted on a homemade steel bracket he'd welded in secret, was pointed at a target 2,400 yards out and closing fast. No rule permitted this. No Navy instruction anticipated this. No court in the Navy would forgive this. But in the next 9 minutes, this forbidden solution would kill 4 enemy pilots, save the Franklin from terrible damage, and prove that sometimes the most important weapon in war is the one a working-class mechanic builds in the dark because the system refuses to listen to the men bleeding on the deck. Rourke didn't hesitate. The Val released its bomb, a high-pitched whistle slicing through the chaos. He placed the fine crosshairs of his custom scope 2 inches above the enemy pilot's helmet, adjusting for bullet drop and the 8-knot crosswind hitting the deck. He breathed out. He fired. The Springfield shot was sharp and flat, lost in the thunder of the big guns. The recoil drove into his shoulder like a punch. At 600 yards, the Val's nose dropped suddenly, violently, not from structural damage, but from the instant stopping of human control. The aircraft rolled right, hit a wave, and exploded in a fountain of white foam and burning fuel. The bomb exploded harmlessly in the Pacific, 80 feet from the ship's hull. Rourke worked the bolt, ejected the empty shell, and swung the rifle toward the second incoming threat. There were 6 more aircraft behind it. Thomas Rourke was born in Utica, New York in 1921 into a world built on steel, sweat, and the unforgiving rhythm of factory shifts. His father, Michael Rourke, worked the assembly line at the Savage Arms factory for 23 years, his hands permanently stained with gun oil and metal shavings. His mother, Catherine, took in laundry from the wealthier neighborhoods across the Mohawk River, her knuckles raw from lye soap and cold water. Tommy, the middle of 3 boys, grew up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment that smelled like cabbage, machine grease, and the faint metallic smell of the Erie Canal docks where he worked summers starting at age 14. The work was brutal, loading freight barges with steel parts, packaged grain and lumber, 12-hour shifts in suffocating August heat or bone-numbing January cold. It taught him the physics of leverage, the need for precision, and the cold understanding that machinery doesn't forgive mistakes. A misplaced pry bar could crush a hand. A poorly secured load could kill a man when the barge shifted. Tommy learned to calculate angles, weight distribution, and stress limits not from books, but from survival. His escape was the woods. Every weekend, sometimes just before dawn on work days, he'd head north into the Adirondacks with his rifle, a battered hand-me-down Winchester his father had given him at age 12. Hunting wasn't sport for the Roars. It was economics. A 10-point buck meant 2 months of venison. A successful turkey hunt meant Thanksgiving dinner. Tommy became obsessed with the science of a shot. Bullet path, wind drift, the way cold air increased muzzle velocity by 17 feet per second, how a deer's heart sat 3 inches behind its front shoulder. By 16, he could drop a running whitetail at 200 yards with iron sights. By 18, he was competing in local shooting competitions and winning. In 1940, he scraped together $47 over 8 months and mail-ordered the parts for a custom Springfield Model 1903. A heavy match-grade barrel from a supplier in Pennsylvania, a precision-machined receiver from a gunsmith in Vermont, a hand-fitted stock he shaped himself in his father's garage workshop. He put it together piece by piece, learning the tolerances, the harmonics of barrel vibration, the exact torque specifications for every screw. The rifle became an extension of his will, accurate to 1 minute of angle at 800 yards, capable of putting 5 shots into a 3-inch circle in any weather. It was the finest thing he'd ever built. Then December 7th, 1941 shattered the world. Tommy enlisted in the Navy on December 10th, driven by the same practical thinking that governed his hunting. The enemy had attacked, men were needed, and sitting idle while others fought was unacceptable. The recruiter looked at his dock worker's hands and his mechanical test scores and assigned him to engineering. "You'll work the boilers, son. Keep the ship moving." Nobody asked about his shooting skills. Nobody cared about a custom rifle. He reported to the USS Franklin in March 1943 as a Seaman Second Class, was assigned to damage control, and spent 18 months in the belly of the ship managing steam pressure and sealing broken pipes while men died on the deck above. He watched the deaths pile up. He recorded them not in any official log, but in a small notebook he kept in his locker, written in the cramped shorthand of a man who understood that numbers told stories the officers refused to hear. October 24th, 1944. USS Princeton. Chief Machinist's mate Michael Mac McKenna, 24, Boston. Tommy had shared a mess table with Mac for 7 months. A loud red-headed Irishman who sang off-key and sent half his pay home to his widowed mother. A Yokosuka D-4 wide-duty dive bomber broke through the outer screen at Leyte Gulf, flying so low the main guns couldn't aim down to track it. The aircraft dropped its bomb directly into the Princeton's hangar deck. Mac was supervising a fuel line repair. The explosion vaporized him and 14 other men instantly. Tommy watched the Princeton burn from the Franklin's rail, the smoke column visible for 30 miles. Mac's mother received a telegram and a flag. She never received an explanation for why a bomber was allowed to fly that low, that close, without effective defensive fire. November 5th, 1944. USS Lexington. Seaman First Class David Sullivan, 20, Philadelphia. Sullivan had worked a 20mm gun mount on the Lexington's port side. A kid from Kensington with a gap-toothed grin who talked constantly about the girl he was going to marry when the war ended. Tommy had played poker with him during a resupply stop at Ulithi. A Nakajima B-6 in Jill torpedo bomber made its run low and flat, exploiting the known blind spot where the 20mm guns couldn't aim down and the 40mm guns couldn't turn fast enough. Sullivan fired. Tommy saw the tracer arc pass clean over the aircraft's canopy. Useless. The Jill released its torpedo, then shot at Sullivan's position with its tail gun as it climbed away. Sullivan died on the mount, his chest torn open, still gripping the gun's handles. His fiancée's last letter to him, unopened, was forwarded to his parents 3 weeks later. March 19th, 1945. USS Franklin. Seaman Apprentice Timothy Walsh, 18, Seattle. Walsh wasn't even a gunner. He was a deck cleaner, sweeping spent shells and mopping oil slicks. A stray .50 caliber round from a damaged B-25 Mitchell making an emergency landing bounced off the deck and hit Walsh in the neck. He bled out in 4 minutes while Tommy and 2 other men tried desperately to stop the bleeding with tourniquets that couldn't grip the wound. Walsh had lied about his age to enlist. He was 17. His mother sent cookies every month in tins that smelled like cinnamon. Tommy packed those tins with Walsh's belongings and watched them go into the mail with a form letter explaining her son had died in the service of his country. By March 1945, Tommy had logged 43 deaths in his notebook, men killed not by overwhelming enemy force, not by tactical brilliance, but by a specific identifiable flaw in American anti-aircraft doctrine. The problem was mathematical and undeniable. Low-level attack aircraft approaching between 1,800 and 400 yards created a geometric blind spot where turn speeds, depression limits, and minimum shooting ranges prevented effective fire. The big 40mm guns designed for high-altitude interception couldn't aim below 15 degrees and couldn't turn faster than 25 degrees per second, inadequate for a diving aircraft at 250 knots. The 20mm guns had better turning, but a minimum effective range of 400 yards due to tracer ballistics and fuse arming distances. In that 1,400-yard corridor, enemy pilots operated with near total safety. Tommy brought the data to Lieutenant Commander Alistair Vance, the Franklin's weapons officer, on March 22nd, 1945. He showed him the notebook, the logged deaths, the calculated angles. "Sir, we have a structural vulnerability. The low-level attackers are exploiting a gap in our coverage." Vance, a career officer from Annapolis with 17 years of service, barely glanced at the notebook. "Seaman, the Mark 14 fire control system is rated to specification. The guns provide overlapping fields of fire per Navy doctrine. If enemy aircraft are penetrating, it's a failure of the outer combat air patrol screen or pilot error on approach vectors. We don't redesign defensive systems based on stories from damage control personnel." "Sir, it's not stories. It's 43 men. That will be all," Seaman roared. "Return to your station." Tommy left the officer's stateroom with his notebook and a cold, clear understanding. The system would not save his crewmates. The regulations written by men safe in Washington would not adapt in time. The deaths would continue, officially classified as acceptable losses, until someone broke the rules. The breaking point came on March 28th during a routine strike mission against Japanese positions in the Ryukyus. Tommy was at his damage control station on the second deck when the call came over the loudspeaker. "All hands, general quarters. Air raid, warning red. Multiple bogies inbound, low altitude." He grabbed his kit and ran topside. The sky was clear, cobalt blue, deceptively peaceful. Then he saw them. A tight formation of Kawasaki Ki, 61 Hien, Tony fighters, 8 aircraft in 2 elements skimming the wavetops at 400 knots. They weren't coming high. They were coming exactly where the guns couldn't track them effectively. The big guns opened up, their heavy reports shaking the deck. Black puffs of flak appeared at 2,000 yards, then 1,500, then 1,200. Always behind the targets, always too slow. The Tonys split into individual attack runs. One peeled toward the Franklin's port quarter, accelerating into the blind spot. Tommy watched the 20mm gunners turn desperately, their weapon unable to keep pace. The Tony's pilot, visible now at 800 yards, his face a pale oval behind the canopy glass, armed as bombs. Tommy made his decision. He turned and ran, not away, but toward the forward maintenance access, down 2 decks to a hidden storage space where 8 days earlier he had hidden his custom Springfield in a crate marked signal flares, authorized personnel only. He ripped open the crate, grabbed a rifle and 4 loaded clips, and ran back topside. Total time, 90 seconds. The Tony was at 1,200 yards when Tommy reached the port catwalk. He clipped the rifle's custom mount, a quick-release bracket he'd made from salvaged steel plate and hydraulic clamps, onto the deck rail. The mount locked with a solid, precise click. He loaded 5 rounds, worked the bolt, and brought the rifle up. The scope's crosshairs, fitted with hand-drawn spider silk for ultra-fine precision, settled on the Tony's cockpit. At 900 yards, he fired. The 180-grain match-grade bullet, a custom hunting round he'd hand-loaded with non-standard powder charges for maximum velocity retention, left the muzzle at 2,220 feet per second. Flight time, 1.1 seconds. The Tony's canopy shattered. The pilot's head snapped back. The aircraft, now a pilotless missile, pitched down and hit the water 400 yards from the Franklin's bow in a fountain of white spray. Tommy didn't watch the impact. He was already tracking the second Tony, cycling the bolt, loading the next round. The aircraft was at 1,400 yards, turning left to avoid the big gunfire. He led the turn by 2 aircraft lengths, placed the crosshairs on the pilot's upper body, and fired again. The Tony staggered in mid-flight, not exploding, not trailing smoke, just suddenly losing coordination. It rolled upside down and crashed into the Pacific. "Port side, what's your status?" The voice over the phone was frantic, confused. "We're showing 2 splashes with no gun hits. We engaged those aircraft." Tommy ignored the call. A third Tony was inbound, lower and faster than the others, its pilot learning from his wingman's deaths. Tommy tracked him at 1,100 yards, fired, and missed. The round passed through the aircraft's tail section without hitting anything critical. The Tony continued its run. Tommy worked the bolt, his hands moving with the automatic precision of 10,000 practice repetitions. He fired again at 700 yards. The pilot slumped forward. The Tony's nose dropped, and the aircraft cartwheeled across the wave tops before breaking apart. 3 confirmed kills in 4 minutes with a weapon that officially didn't exist. The attack broke off. The remaining Tonys, seeing 3 of their group vanish without visible flak hits, pulled up and left. The all-clear sounded. Tommy took apart the mount, packed the rifle back into its canvas case, and returned it to the hidden storage crate. His shoulder ached from recoil. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline burnout. He walked back to his damage control station and waited for the consequences. They came faster than he expected. Petty Officer Second Class Sam Jenkins found him 20 minutes later, his face pale. "Roar, what the heck did you just do?" "My job. Radio room is reporting 3 bogeys dropped without confirmed gun hits. Gunnery's going insane trying to figure out what killed them. Maybe they had mechanical failures." Jenkins stared at him. Mechanical failures don't happen to 3 aircraft in 4 minutes, all in the same attack run. He lowered his voice. "I was on the catwalk. I saw you. I saw the rifle." Tommy said nothing. "You could get court-martialed for this. Unauthorized weapon, unsanctioned modifications, discharging firearms outside of approved combat protocol. Walsh is dead because we follow protocol. Sullivan's dead. McKenna's dead. 43 men are dead because the system has a flaw and nobody with the authority to fix it will admit it exists." Tommy's voice was flat, emotionless. "So yeah, I broke the rules. I'll break them again tomorrow if more Tonys come in low." Jenkins looked at the deck, then back at Tommy. "The officers are going to ask questions. Let them ask." But the officers didn't ask because the enlisted men didn't tell them. Jenkins kept quiet. The 20mm gunners who'd seen the Tonys drop kept quiet. Word spread through the crew in whispers, in brief conversations in the mess deck and the sleeping compartments, in the unspoken understanding that sometimes survival required breaking the chain of command. Within 48 hours, 3 other damage control personnel on the Franklin had approached Tommy privately, asking if he could teach them. Within a week, 2 sailors on the USS Bunker Hill, which had resupplied alongside the Franklin at Ulithi, had heard the story from a signalman and were experimenting with their own hunting rifles. The innovation spread not through official channels, but through the underground network of enlisted men who understood that doctrine killed and improvisation saved lives. The enemy noticed within 10 days. On April 17, 1945, a captured pilot from a downed Yokosuka D-4Y Judy, Lieutenant Kiro Oki, was questioned by naval intelligence aboard the USS Enterprise. Oki was shaken, his hands trembling even after medical treatment. The intelligence officer's report noted, subject displayed unusual psychological distress when discussing final attack approach. When asked about American defensive fire, subject stated, "It is not the flak anymore. Something else stops us at the lowest moment. The aircraft simply stops responding. It is happening to many pilots now. We do not understand it." 3 days later, a radio intercept near Okinawa captured a transmission between 2 Japanese aircraft during an attack run. The voice was identified as Sakanjo Oda, a veteran pilot credited with sinking the destroyer USS Abner Red. His words, translated, "Do not commit to the low approach on that formation. They have something new, a rifle from the deck. It hits you in the final second when you cannot evade. Stay above 300 meters." The psychological impact was immediate and measurable. Japanese attack doctrine, which had relied on ultra-low approaches to exploit the American blind spot, began shifting toward higher altitude runs, sacrificing accuracy for survivability. The change saved American lives, even when Tommy's rifle wasn't present, because the enemy's fear of being killed by an invisible sniper forced them into engagement profiles where the big guns and smaller guns could work effectively. The statistical validation was undeniable. January through March 1945, 38% casualty rate among close-in deck crews across Task Force 58, with 27 confirmed successful low-level bomber attacks, resulting in ship damage or loss. May through June 1945, 23% casualty rate, 11 confirmed successful attacks, a 39% reduction in enemy effectiveness. Conservative estimates credited the deck rifle concept with saving at least 14 major vessels from critical damage and approximately 240 naval personnel from death or severe injury. The Navy's official discovery came in late May when a routine weapons inspection on the Franklin found Tommy's custom ammunition. Boxes of 180-grain match-grade rounds hidden in a locker-marked hydraulic system spares. An investigation was launched. Tommy was called before Commander Vance and the ship's executive officer. Vance's face was red with barely controlled anger. Seaman Rourke, these rounds are not Navy issue. This constitutes unauthorized modification of armament stores. Where did you acquire this ammunition? I made it, sir. You made it? Yes, sir. Hand-loaded in my father's workshop before deployment. I brought approximately 300 rounds aboard, concealed in equipment containers. The executive officer leaned forward. And the rifle? Custom-built Springfield, 1903, sir. Mail-order components, self-assembled. Vance's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. You brought a privately owned, non-regulation firearm aboard a United States Navy warship and discharged it during combat operations without authorization. Yes, sir. Do you have any concept of the severity of this violation? This is a court-martial offense. This is potentially years in a naval prison. Tommy met his eyes. With respect, sir, I have a notebook with 43 names of men who died because our anti-aircraft doctrine has a 1,400-yard blind spot that we refuse to acknowledge. I tried bringing this to your attention on March 22nd. You told me it was within specification. Those men are still dead. The blind spot still exists. So I fixed it. Vance stood abruptly. You don't get to fix anything, Seaman. You follow orders. You follow regulations. You don't. Sir, the XO's voice cut through. Before we proceed with disciplinary action, I'd like to see the after-action reports from April 7th and April 20th. He looked at Tommy. How many aircraft did you engage with this weapon? 11 confirmed engagements, sir. 7 confirmed kills, 3 probable kills, 1 damaged. The XO and Vance exchange a long look. The XO said quietly, We've had gunnery crews asking questions about unusual losses in the low approach corridor. Any intelligence reports about Japanese doctrine shifts. He turned back to Tommy. This will go to the Admiral. It went to Admiral Chester W. Nimitz himself. The report, classified, eyes only, detailed the unauthorized weapon, the tactical effectiveness, the enemy response, and the statistical reduction in successful attacks. Nimitz, a practical man who understood that wars were won by results rather than regulations, made a decision that would never appear in any official history. The court-martial was quietly dropped. The rifle was taken away, and Tommy was transferred to special training duties. But the concept survived. The Navy Engineering Bureau, unable to officially endorse an enlisted man's illegal modification, instead sped up development of a new 50 caliber round with a tungsten penetrator core, a projectile that replicated the terminal ballistics of Tommy's custom hunting ammunition. The new rounds were issued to select carriers starting in June 1945, with official documentation crediting advanced metallurgical research for the improvement. Tommy's name appeared nowhere in the reports. He received no medal, no commendation, no promotion. He was simply assigned to train other marksmen in precision anti-aircraft techniques, teaching them to aim not at the machine, but at the man flying it. Seaman First Class Thomas Rourke survived the war. He was honorably discharged in November 1945 and returned to Utica with $247 in separation pay and a sea bag containing 3 uniforms and a small notebook with 43 names. He didn't attend veteran gatherings. He didn't march in parades. He took his knowledge of hydraulics and heavy machinery and opened a small garage near the Erie Canal docks, repairing diesel engines and industrial equipment. He married a woman named Helen who worked at the Woolworths on Genesee Street. They had 2 daughters. He never told them about the rifle, about the Tonys falling from the sky, about the men whose names filled his notebook. Every April 7th, the anniversary of the Franklin's near destruction, his phone would ring once in the evening. Sam Jenkins would be on the other end. Neither man would speak for 10 seconds. Then Jenkins would say, "Still here, Tommy," and Tommy would reply, "Still here, Sam." Then they'd hang up. The calls continued until Jenkins died in 1979. Thomas Rourke died in his sleep on February 3rd, 1988, at age 66, in the same Utica apartment where he'd assembled his custom Springfield 48 years earlier. His obituary in the Utica Observer-Dispatch mentioned his distinguished Navy service during World War II and his successful garage business. It made no mention of the mail-order rifle, the forbidden ammunition, or the 240 men whose lives he'd saved by breaking every rule that mattered. In 2007, a military historian researching classified weapons files discovered the suppressed court-martial report and connected it to Rohr's service record. The full story emerged. The custom rifle, the hand-loaded ammunition, the 11 combat engagements, the enemy doctrine shift, the statistical validation. Post-war analysis revealed that Rohr's concept, high-velocity, precision anti-personnel fire targeting pilots rather than aircraft structures, had become the foundational principle of modern close-in weapon systems, including the Phalanx CIWS that protects every American carrier today. The irony is absolute. The weapon system that now defends the fleet traces its doctrinal lineage to an illegal rifle built by a freight handler in his father's garage, fired in violation of every Navy regulation by a man who was nearly court-martialed for saving his ship. This is the reality of how wars are actually won. Not through the careful processes of bureaucracy, not through doctrine written by staff officers in air-conditioned offices thousands of miles from a shooting, but through working-class men, the mechanics, the dock workers, the forgotten sailors in the engine rooms, who see their friends dying from a fixable problem, who build a solution with their own hands in the dark, who risk everything to prove that sometimes the most important thing you can do is break the rules that are killing people. Tommy Rohrke understood something the system couldn't, that regulations exist to protect institutions, but men exist to protect each other. When those two principles conflict, the choice is simple. You save the men. You deal with the consequences later. 240 sailors went home to their families because one man refused to accept that their deaths were within specification. That's the story the Navy never wanted told. If you found this account of forbidden innovation and working-class courage compelling, please like this video to help others discover it. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories from the men who actually fought the war. Leave a comment sharing where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.